live and direct right to you from the BSTN London flagship store. Can we make some noise at BSTN? Yeah. It has been a hot minute, but we are back. We're doing up all things culture. We're going to be bringing you all the chat about football and fashion and every way it intersects. So we want to give a massive shout out to Adidas and the fresh kicks. But we also want to say a massive big shout out to Adidas for bringing together an incredible panel to be talking about this conversation. So let's get into it. You want female football, you want pro, you want comedian, writer and actor. Can you give it up for our girl on the set? It's Sapphire. Let's go, Sapphire. Now I'm very just gassed to be sitting next to an absolute legend in the game. It's the OG himself, Adidas ambassador. Give it up for Gary, please. I hear that he's a collector of community, which is exactly what we need on this panel right here. A lover of the sport and all things culture. Give it up for Ellis. Let's go, Ellis. So not only have we got Ellis, if you want to be talking about everything to do with skating and everything in between, it's my guy Benny in the car. Let's go, Benny. See it? I like it. And last, but certainly not least, you know how wavy this bio is? If you see it in my IG next week, don't at me. Conversationalist. Are you mad? Digital creator over at Versus as well. Give it up for Mayowa! Okay, we're ready to go. We're ready. I told you the panel is on fire. It is a full house at Brixton, and I want to be talking about football, and I kind of want to know how everyone kind of intersects and gets into it. So let me go first with someone with the Leeds accent giving energy on this panel. Let me go, Sapphire. So, Sapphire, you be repping the ladies.
Yes.
Women's football at the moment is popping.
Yes.
Where does it sit for you, though? What's your opinion of the sport so far?
Well, I mean, football has given me a lot in my life. Like, it's given me confidence. I've travelled the world coaching and playing football. Like, it's given me so many things. Yeah. But where women's football is now is, it's not at the pinnacle. There's so much more to come. But, I mean, England are in the final this weekend. The women's, it's the first time that they've got to the final. It's the first time an English team has got to the final since 1966.
Come on.
So there's a lot to be proud of. And it's a different experience to when I first started playing when I was 7 years old. I was looked down upon for playing sport. My mother was like, is there something wrong with her? Do you know what I mean? Whereas now parents would love their little girls to play football because they understand what sport can give to people. Like, it breeds so many different things that are really healthy for you as your body and your mindset. So women's football in England right now is at the pinnacle in 2023 because we're in the final this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to come back to that because we needed 7-year-old youths to making sure that there's next lot of 7-year-olds coming through as well.
Yeah.
Gary, let me jump over to this side. I know there's a group chat on this side going that I'm not a part of yet, so I'm going to come back to the group chat. But Gary, you really are a legend in the game, and from time I walked in, everyone's like, you're going to be sitting next to Gary. So I've got to know the tea, Gary. When did it become real that football was a love for your heart?
I guess I grew up around football. I don't know about a love for my heart. My mum used to work on the market, and my dad used to take me to watch Blackburn Rovers because he liked watching Blackburn, and there was no childminder. But I wasn't tall enough to see over the wall, so I used to have to take
I'm still not tall enough to see over
I used to have to take the washing up bowl out of our sink and carry that on the bus down to Ewood Park. Put that by the wall and stand on tiptoes trying to see over the wall, and it was always chucking down in rain. So it used to be like the longest 90 minutes of my week watching football as a kid. And it was a very different experience of football than football is nowadays. But I kind of grew up with it all around me. My dad was a season ticket holder at Blackburn. And then as I got into, because I'm a little bit older than you guys, so there wasn't internet to find out what's happening as far as fashion and style went. And one of the places where I would find out what people were wearing was at football matches, I guess. So I've kind of I was never a great player. I was okay. Do you know what I mean? I'm not an amazing player, but I've always kind of been in and around it, and as I've got older I kind of enjoy it more. The older I get, the more I seem to enjoy it, I think. So yeah, Blackburn Rovers are my team. I go and watch them as often as I can. I was at Rotherham last weekend. I'll be watching them at home to Hull this weekend.
Oh, nice.
So yeah.
Sweet. I love these stories. I absolutely love them. And you did ask a poignant question there. Who do you support, Benny?
I'm Chelsea.
Okay. Look at your gang already.
Yeah.
BSTN has strategically put the Chelsea players here. So talk to me a little bit about the skateboarding culture as well, because you've got so much to add to this conversation and the parallels between the two sports.
Yeah, I suppose parallels between the two. Yeah, I started skateboarding 20 odd years ago.
Yeah.
And nowadays, skateboarding's in the Olympics. You have all these big brands that want to get behind skateboarding. But when I started, it was, I don't know, frowned upon. It's seen as a nuisance, and it's still seen as a nuisance in a lot of places. But for me, it was like, oh yeah, you got a yo-yo to go with that. What are you doing, skateboard? Like, what's that all about? But yeah, skateboarding, it's in a good place, and it's growing, and it's kind of more getting appreciated for the expression and the art form and like everything that it actually is. And it makes me happy to see people appreciate it for what we do, I guess. Yeah.
And see it in your own eyes and the way you see it as well.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
sure. There's so much growth for being like just across the panel so far. Now, given that we're talking about Chelsea, I want to just scoot over to you both then. Before, we were doing chat, and you said you're in the same group chat, and you didn't know that one another was in the same group chat that you're also in. So, Ellis, give me the background story of how you know Mayowa.
We was in a group chat of about 100 and something people that Jamal Edwards put together, rest in peace, big legend from London. And he would always be talking in there, and I would always be moaning, because people was like, now that Chelsea's got loads of money, they're like, oh, this isn't working this week. We need to buy Neymar and get Messi and Ronaldo and gonna get Gary to make a new kit and blah, blah, blah. And I'd always be like, oh, it don't always work like that. Get the old Chelsea boys back in, I miss Sola, and just always moaning, basically. Saying the opposite to whatever everyone else said.
Okay. What about yourself, Mayowa? How did you first meet Ellis? What's your friendship go back to?
No, it's like that. I think that's the pure thing about football. It's like a global language. It doesn't matter whether you're from near or far. It's something that communicates people together. So within this group chat, you've got people that work in the same industry, you've got people working completely different industries, but their love that brings them together is this one thing of 22 people kicking the ball on a Saturday or Sunday, and it's a beautiful thing. So we will talk about stuff that's Chelsea related. If it was Spurs related, you get booted out. You don't come back for a while. But through sort of people doing reach outs and saying, oh, does anyone know if there's any recce spots and stuff like that, people started realising that, oh, we actually do similar things. I mean, we've worked on projects together with Chelsea off the back of linking up in a group chat, and it just shows you the power that football has, especially when you utilise it to sort of, focus on what the culture and your lived experience has given you.
Yeah. You make such a good point about it just being a global language, and that's where I want to jump in next. So it's Spurs all across generations. But given fashion now, fashion is also a really nice glue that pieces people together. But I want to kind of go the first intersection of people and people of colour, and the way in which people of colour have added value and just sauce to the game. And so, Sapphire, jumping in for you, what's it like to be a black woman in this sport when maybe generations ago it wasn't as accessible or as safe for people to be in? So for yourself now, what are some of the joys that football brings you as a black woman?
That's a deep question. Football joys that bring me as a black woman. I feel like I could maybe like twist that a bit and just add maybe like what black people have brought to British football maybe. And one of the things that stood out when I saw the questions was I think one of the turning points in like branding with football and sport, I think they've realised that there was a bit of a niche, and there's a coolness that comes from London, like UK culture. As much as I hate this country, I do think that like the culture that has come from London is probably the top in terms of like music, style, and I think that some of the advertising I've seen in the past 5 or 6 years has really tapped into like black Britishness and Londonness and the athletes that have come from London and combined it with fashion. And I think people are quite aware of the coolness of like the Caribbean islands, in particular like Jamaica, and I think people have been able to piece things together and make really cool like products and design and like advertising that like mesh everything together, because they've realised that actually London, I think, is probably the epicenter of like coolness.
Can I just say one thing?
I might disagree on that.
I was gonna say
Even though I'm a northerner.
a lot of the people don't realise though, with early terrace culture, it was like Liverpool mostly travelling in Europe and bringing a lot of the style from Europe here, and then people in London kind of going up north, seeing it there, and then bringing it down here, and then just trying to spend more money on it, essentially. Because a lot of the big shops were based in London, but like a lot of it was people genuinely going to Champions League games and seeing Italian people, how they're dressed,
Right.
with like Stone Island and Cecchini and stuff like that, and then copying that and then bringing it back to the UK and then it travelling around. But now I understand what you're saying now in terms of London being seen as the centres, because there's like so much going on here in terms of flagship stores,
Right.
but a lot of it, like when I go up to Liverpool, Manchester, or when I was partying in Leeds, you would see more friends out with the whole look, head to toe, like all the different brands, all of it. Like, I don't know if you see in the skaters, like how they're dressed up north in comparison to London. It's slightly different.
But I definitely think London's kind of like an epicenter in terms of like cultures and like
like a more of a melting pot of like,
yeah. And I think you've seen that in like the flavour in the advertisings. Like there's definitely a bit more seasoning.
Do you know what I find mad though? Because ultimately we're talking about football, right? And by nature of the actual game, you see people in uniform every single week. And football's almost like a religion, right? We talked about being a global language. It's something that ties people together. And you have to think about it. You've got all people with different works of life and they come to this one place every single week. That's their place of worship almost. So the uniforms that people developed over time just became more influential. I mean, we're talking about this now. The samba sort of era is a massive thing that is synonymous with football culture, right? Fashion. Gazelle, same thing, because people are like, this is our uniform, this is how we identify each other. But one thing that really stands out for me, if we're talking about sort of like, you know, people of colour and everything, is it's really amazing how on the pitch, there hasn't always been diversity, but the individuals that stand out really change what happens. You had people that will go in to get gold teeth because Ian Wright had a gold tooth. Do you get where I'm coming from? You had people that started rocking chains and stuff like that. Exactly, and it's one of those things where I think a lot of culture that we saw on and off the pitch came from people being mavericks and being authentically, unapologetically themselves. And then people thought, you know what, well, that person looks and sounds like me, I can do that. And then people thought, you know what, this is a cool thing to do. And then it starts breathing on. But I think influences come from different places. Like influences up north. Manchester's a massive, massive hub of football. The north is such a massive thing. Those influences can come from everywhere. Birmingham, if you look at sort of the culture there, their whole references are so different. But the thing that ties it together is there's always a uniform or identity that groups have together. And it's quite interesting to see whether you go across London, the UK, Europe, you're talking about Europe, the Stone Island crew. If you go to some place in Italy, you see it. People sort of identify themselves by what they wear. That's their uniform off the pitch.
I'm just coming back to you about thinking about if you do disagree, has football and fashion always just gone hand in hand for you from the time that you just started watching football, playing football?
For my generation, for sure. Yeah, definitely. You know, I discovered Adidas through football. My first branded trainers were a pair of shoes called Adidas Kick. My first branded football boots were Adidas Beckenbauers with red studs, and I swapped the studs for aluminium studs because I thought red were too flash for somebody of my ability. And
what position do you play?
Centre half.
I was left wing, and I'm pretty quick down that left wing.
I was a left winger.
Yeah, and
Pace.
but it, you know, so that was I found Adidas through football initially, and then shoes like the Samba, the Bamba, the Mamba all became really popular in the early 80s. The interesting thing is, though, the Samba that you're wearing there was not, it was a different Samba than that. It's the one that they call the Samba Super nowadays, that was the go-to shoe for sort of football fans. But then it kind of, we then started to discover that there was a lot more to Adidas than just football shoes. And so then it kind of expanded beyond that. I mean, one of the myths about football fans is that they only wear sort of classic gum-sole three-stripe trainers. You know, in the 80s, coming up through the 80s, it was running shoes, it was court shoes, it was outdoor shoes, it was leisure shoes. And the fashions used to change very, very quickly, and you had to be there experiencing it. It wasn't something that you could do voyeuristically online. You had to actually be going and participating in it. And you know, and so I would always be looking to what the older kids were wearing to get my kind of fashion.
Was you ever nervous
cues.
to like go and ask someone at football, like, oh, where'd you get your trainers from?
You just wouldn't ask them. But the thing about the trainers was there was a huge subculture where I grew up of, you know, it was the Thatcher years, so there was a recession and there was a lot of unemployment, and the generation who were above me would go to Switzerland and Austria and Germany basically stealing Adidas trainers and designer clothes and bringing them back. And so that, you know, that was kind of what dictated the fashion in our area. A lot of it was stolen, basically. And a couple of years back, I worked with CP Company on doing an exhibition for their 50th anniversary in my hometown of Darwin near Blackburn, and it was time with a collaboration I worked on with them and Adidas. And you know, and it's funny because Paul Harvey, who's the head designer at CP, was there, and he met a guy who was a little bit older than me, and he was the first guy I saw wearing the Milli Melia goggle jacket. And he sort of said to him, you know, I introduced Paul Harvey to him and said, you know, this is the first guy I saw wearing the goggle jacket, would have been probably 1989. And Paul Harvey was like, so how did you afford a jacket like that? And he was like, I stoved the window in and took it off the mannequin because, you know, that was how it was. It was, you know, it's football fashion really was driven by working class kids. You know, that's where it all starts from, really. And I think, you know, it's like nowadays people have a set idea about what that look is, but actually it was something that you had to be in and amongst to stay abreast of how quickly it used to change. So it would go from, you know, it went from kind of European expensive sportswear brands like Tashini and Fila and those type of brands. But then it went through to, you know, well, before that it was Pringle sweaters and, you know, Fred Perry t-shirts and Slazenger sweaters. But, you know, it was constantly evolving. So it'd go from sportswear and then it'd go to like gentlemen's outfitters and corduroys and Burberry jackets. And then from that it went to like Armani and European casual wear brands. So it was just constantly changing and evolving. And if you weren't in amongst that, you kind of very quickly get left behind and kind of found out, really. But, you know, you didn't really ask people where they got the stuff from because, you know, you just
picked it up along the
you just kind of, and a lot of it was just, you know, what you could kind of afford, really, or hand-me-downs from older guys. You know, my first Burberry jacket was given to me by a lad called Cockney Paul, who was a kid who moved up to our town from London, and he had a Cockney accent, you know, but he kind of, so it was, you know, and he was one of the first kids I saw breakdancing as well, you know, and like, you know, so it was, yeah, it was just constantly changing and constantly evolving. And yeah, you know, to me it's like a culture in the truest sense, you know. I think a lot of what's going on at the moment is, you know, like, 'cause people are saying, oh, Samba's such a hot shoe right now. And it is a hot shoe, but it's kind of like, that's like a fashion trend, where what I'm talking about is kind of a subculture.
Right.
And I think there's a difference between the two things.
I don't think with social media now, the subcultures have kind of died out because it's like, I know people that are amazing skaters, they're fantastic at football, they'll listen to heavy metal, rap music, they know drill artists, whatever. Whereas it's like, when I'm speaking to my dad, it's like, you belong to a tribe, you stick with them through thick and thin, that's it. And that was just like tunnel vision, you stay with those kind of people and you kind of get on with it.
Jumping from skating to Benny then, is there a look that skaters rock that was once just like, nah, this is what we wear, but now it's become mainstream?
As far as a look, I mean, there's so many within skateboarding, and I think that's where skateboarding really relates to football. Is it's not a privileged sport. Like, it's like, you get yourself a board, you can go do it anywhere. Like, you get yourself a ball, a football. That's why in skateboarding and football, there's people from all walks of life, from everywhere. Because, okay, so maybe with other board sports, like, you're a surfer, oh, well, you've got to live by the ocean. You're a snowboarder, well, you need a lift pass, which is expensive. You need to live by the snow, or like, you know, it's accessible for everyone. So there's people from everywhere doing it. So I think what comes with that is like all walks of life. And skateboarding, there's no coach, there's no rules, there's no like, you got to do it here at a certain time or a certain place. You don't need a team, you don't need anything. You just need you and a board, so you just do it however you want.
A lot of bravery.
A lot of bravery. Because I've been seeing your videos and the way your ankles are really holding up. I'm like, my ankles, to land like that.
Yeah, my ankles are messed up. Yeah, you don't want to take a walk on my ankles.
But the commonality here is about participation.
Yeah.
You know, like skateboarding is, there are lots of brands that have made money from skateboarding, who at their core may have been started by skateboarders, but there's a lot of people who are standing in queues outside those stores who are pausers. They're not skateboarders. They're people who want to look like skateboarders, but are never going to get on a board and break their wrist. They're kind of, you know,
Take the risk for it.
they're not going to take the risk, and it's a similar thing with football. You know, it's kind of like there's people who participate in that, who go home and away to football games, who get herded around by police, who get, you know, everything that comes with being a football fan. And you've got the other people who are on the outside of that, who think it's kind of, you know, it's something that's associated with kind of underclass kids, and it's a bit edgy, so I'll go and get myself a certain brand of anorak or whatever, and it's going to make me appear like I've got some kind of credibility, but I won't go near a football stadium in a million years, because I'm actually not one of those
Hardcore
people.
fans.
I'm not an hardcore fan. I don't participate in it. I'm kind of like, you know, I just buy into these brands because it's a look and it's a trend. So that's what the point I was trying to make. I understand what you're saying about tribes, because I've got a 16-year-old son, and it's kind of like the way he consumes fashion and music is totally different to how I consume fashion and music, because it's like he can listen to everything and he doesn't get into like one particular genre of music. He takes the best bits out of it all, you know. So that's where the boundaries have become more blurred. But the point I'm making is about, you know, there's people who participate in these things, and there's people. I go to football and I see people who are wearing Stone Island jackets, and I know straight away that guy's not a casual, because I can tell from the fit of his jeans, I can tell from his hair. It's nuanced, it's subtle things where you will be able to spot somebody who is...
It's the commercialization of a product, right? It's like at the core of it, as you're saying with skateboarding, there's certain things that you look at and you'd be like, okay, cool. And because those things have been associated with being cool or being something to aspire to, it then gets taken and sometimes bastardized and then becomes mass. Like, for instance, there's connotations with certain things that people wear. If you're wearing TP Company, like you said, okay, you're in the know. People will see that and be like, right, if that's what you need to wear, I'm gonna wear it. And it starts to blur the lines a little bit, but you can still tell within it. But what you mentioned about skateboarding was so interesting, because ultimately, unlike football, on the pitch, there's not a uniform skateboarding. And I think that's one of the purest things about it that made it so accessible and people aspire towards it, because you're doing your own thing. It's a form of expression. The way you dress and the way you skateboard is your expression. And it's why ultimately there was this sort of link that started happening. So for instance, a few years back, you saw Palace doing kits with some of the biggest teams in the world. And it was like, you know what, we're gonna de-strip this whole sort of traditional look we have to go and do something that's quite raw and fresh and unique. And that was great, because ultimately when you're looking at it from the lens that we typically look at it from, it's like, wow, you're kind of moving away from this formality. At the same time though, are you just sort of bastardizing something that's pure at its core? And I think that's where sometimes now the root of where fashion's coming from and in football then starts to get a bit blurry, because what is the purpose? Are you doing it because, you know, people find it cool, or are you doing it to actually celebrate the reality of what is being seen?
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing, right? Instagram, TikTok, people are doing it to look cool, right? For the followers, for the drape. Like, the culture is disappearing and it's more about the social media presence, right? And like capitalism and money and just looking good, like basically like getting injections, fillers, Botox, BBLs, like it's all about looking good, right? It doesn't matter about the heart anymore. It's about the image, the likes, right? Like that's, the culture's been stripped, no?
And like, it's not a bad thing. 'Cause I mean, ultimately, if you look at today, most top teams will make a specific retro kit, which is like the 4th or 5th kit, because they understand that this is something that meant something back then. It's just that sometimes with everything, you have to question, okay, what is the why behind this? Are you doing this because you're realizing that it's actually a pure representation? Like every football club, you support Blackburn, right? Blackburn is a pillar of that community. It's something that brings everyone together. Are you doing it because you're celebrating that club's colours and what it means, or because it looked cool on someone and then everyone just sort of adapted it?
Is it money or belonging then?
Well, this is the question. It's
but
a
you've
hard
got to
thing
pay
to prove.
to belong. If you can't afford it, you're not part of the team.
Yeah, the thing about it is, though, a lot of the football fashion in the 80s wasn't super expensive.
Yes, exactly.
So a lot, you know, like we used to go to the underground market in Manchester and get cords and jeans, and it wasn't, you know, like there was a whole look in Manchester where it was like a scruff look. but you would, you'd be wearing a pair of kind of semi-flared jeans with frayed bottoms and a pair of Adidas suede trainers with a kind of, with an anorak, but then underneath it you'd have an Armani sweater, and it'd just be like, to somebody who didn't know, you'd almost look slightly scruffy, like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo or whatever, but then it would be like somebody who would know would spot the sweater and know immediately, or see the way that you've got your polo shirt collar just poking out under your crew neck. It's those little nuanced details that people who are into that can spot. And people who aren't into it. I mean, for me, I get frustrated when I hear terms like bloke core. I don't like hearing things like lad culture, because I think it immediately dumbs down working class people and makes working class people into some kind of moronic version of what they think.
Tell me about it, lad.
What they think football casuals are, though. It's kind of like a guy called Ben Banks works for marketing, who did, they did Stone Island, CP, Paul and Shark, all those brands for forever. He said to me, the audience that the football audience is probably the most sophisticated menswear audience there is. And it's this kind of idea that it's just kind of dumb, beer-swilling, misogynistic. I'm not down with that. A lot of the guys who I looked up to, they might have been, these guys who were going over to Switzerland, they might have been on the wrong side of the law, but actually, a lot of them were well read. They had great record collections. They were politicised. They were actually, self-educated. Yeah, they were smart. They were smart people. They were not morons. And this idea, this kind of version of laddishness that gets painted around football fans. Yeah, there is that element within it. I'm not going to dispute that. But casuals, it's clean living under difficult conditions. It's like the smartness and the stylishness and the mentality of mod mixed with the kind of anti-establishment attitude of punk. It's those two things almost mixed together.
That is us, like, skateboarding. It's a nuisance. Everyone sees it as a nuisance, like, it's fucking noisy, your board hits some random pedestrian, like, we hate you, go away. You see every bench in the city, it's got the little stoppers on it, so we can't go skate it. And they're like, here's a skate park, go and this is where you can do what you do. And we're like, nah, it doesn't look good. Like, the whole artistic expression behind skateboarding is going and doing it in the streets. Like, what we do happens in the streets. And yeah, you've built a skate park for us. I'll go and practice my trick there. So I've got it perfect, so I can go and do it in that really expensive building in Liverpool Street where the security guy's not there on a Sunday morning, so that's when I'm going to go do it, and someone's going to shoot it, and then I've done it, and then I can show it to the world, and that's what we do. And
do you know what the football version of that is, though? Is no ball games. Every estate you go to, no ball games. There's no spaces to play. But if you look at sort of football as a form of expression, especially coming from South London, they call it the concrete Catalonia because everyone has to play on concrete. Right. And there's a certain level of skill and sort of application you learn from playing in the street.
It's funny that you were saying that because everyone in my school that was deemed cool, you was either good at skating or good at football. And if you weren't good at either of them, best of luck. You had to just survive to year 11 and then reinvent yourself at college.
Fighting's another one though that came in handy, bro.
Do you know what's so funny is that for our age group, it's so like squashed down in school that it's like people's like, oh, he's rowdy, just stay away from him. Just like if you want to express yourself, it's like literally skateboarding or playing football, and that was it. So it's like even my little brothers now, the way that they play in comparison to I used to play with my dad and my uncles. People are volleying me up in the air like I was a football. I'd get up, get on with it, go and slide tackle a 40-year-old getting stuck in. My little brother the other day was upset because someone barged him on the floor and he was all embarrassed. And I was like, that's a part of football. That's why I've got like a lot of love and respect for skaters because like you said, you have to tell yourself to get back up. You get the skateboard, you go and do it. I'm there with like 11 other people playing or playing on FIFA or whatever. We get all the love, and in football it's a bit more institutionalized where you can go to a club and there's loads of coaches and whatever else. But if you hurt yourself, you have to kind of get on with it. And
You're all on your own.
You were saying about the Olympics, right? Of course, is like a massive thing. Do you feel like the core of what skateboarding is, as an example, do you think it's a great thing because ultimately the world can see what it is, or do you think it's one of those things where people will try and put it into this sort of system and suppress it? Because I think about most of the ballers I grew up with, played football in the streets, they get into academies and whatnot, they're then suppressed to play a certain way. It's the same thing with off the pitch in terms of people's fashion senses and whatnot. It's like, no, you have to kind of confide into this like ideal. And it's something that's sort of anti the whole point of expressing yourself, which is what fashion, football, and all these things do. They're forms of expressions. Do you feel that sometimes when something gets bigger, that form of expression has to be distilled because you then have to put it in something that's acceptable?
Yeah. You know what? There's two sides of it. There's the competition skaters that are like, I'll do the X Games, I'll do the Olympics,
Yeah.
I'll get the deal with Red Bull or Monster Energy and blah, 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 and take the check and blah, blah, blah. And the side I'm on is like, nah, like, it can be some scummy back alley in Brixton, but they've got the good little curb cut embankment, and that's where I'm gonna do my shit because that's what looks cool, and I'm gonna get the photographer and the filmer, hey, sorry, but you gotta come to this back alley in Brixton. It's kind of sketchy, but this is gonna look sick, like I wanna shoot this, blah, blah, blah. And the crossover is like, you know, this raw, dirty side that I'm talking about. Then some brands come in and they're like, oh, well, we see what you're doing. And whether it's Adidas, whether it's whoever, like, oh, we're gonna pay you to do that. You know what? You're scummy and weird, like, we don't really understand it, but people seem to like it. Like, we're gonna cut you a check for that. Like, that's cool. Like, and that is where skateboarding's getting some love in the world, I guess. Yeah.
Skate when you was in school?
Yeah.
Did people ever take you less serious?
Absolutely fucking ridiculed for it. Yeah.
But
yeah.
in terms of like your football takes and stuff, was people like, oh, you're a skater, we're not listening?
It was like, yeah. Kiddies who play football, and then me on lunch break. No, I'm taking my board and I'm going to the skate park, and it was looked down upon and frowned upon and like whatever. And
you know how you mentioned that skateboarding is going to be at the Olympics? Mm-hmm. One thing that it reminds me of is ultimately with football, the boys I grew up with, the more they elevated away from sort of street football into sort of actual 11-a-side, they had to be suppressed to fit this sort of norm of this is how you have to play. Do you feel that that may happen with skateboarding, where you've got people that are starting from the ground up and doing things the raw way, but in order to kind of go to this other side, you have to fit this sort of mold to compete at those levels?
yeah, it's weird. There's definitely two sides of it. There's like the kind of like clean cut, like I'll wear my Monster Energy and I'll drink my Red Bull every time I'm on camera, and I love it and it's so good, or blah, blah, blah. and then you got the guys who are like, fuck that, I don't give a fuck, this is what I do kind of thing. And yeah, definitely two sides of it, that it's like, it's a polarizing spectrum these days. And all these big brands want to get involved in it. But then the kind of like the raw street guys who are like really like kind of salt of the earth, like keeping it core, which is a term that I'm not that into, but people say core, yeah. I've lost my train of thought.
Is there a way around, like, say for instance, someone like yourself, you only want to skate street and you want to make like a professional thing? Like if you're a footballer and you play in a cage, you have to adapt to make money. You can't make money from playing in a cage. Is there a way that you can just keep core to
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, before internet, the only way was like I'd go to the newsagent, I'd look at the back of the magazines, be like, oh, there's a contest this weekend. All right, let's get the train to Milton Keynes to this contest, and I'm gonna go there and show everyone how good I am, blah blah blah. So you kind of had to do that to put yourself out there, and then some guy'd be like, I like the way you skate. We're gonna give you free stuff, and we'll send you to this other contest, and we'll send you there or there. So you kind of have to put yourself out there to do it. But nowadays, there's social media. Like I'm a team manager for Adidas, so I look for young talent and find someone who's really good and try and take them to the top, sort of thing. But now there's Instagram and social media, so everyone, that's your advert.
What would you, if you could give advice to, like, say, like an 8-9-year-old and say, like, okay, I'm the Adidas team manager for skating. Yeah. This is the criteria that we're looking to get you into the team. Like, what kind of advice would you give them? Don't
try too hard. Focus on your craft. Don't worry about when am I going to get paid? When am I going to get a deal? When am I going to get sponsored? I want to be like that guy. Da, da, da. No. Forget about all that. Focus on your craft and just do that, and then good things will happen. Because skateboarding is like, you can't be like the guy who beats his own chest, like, I'm the fucking shit. Like, you can't. You have to be humble because everyone sees right through it straight away, and there's no, like, you can't big yourself up too much. Like, just focus on your craft, be good at what you do, and then good things will come. Like,
It's humility, isn't it? It's all round side humility.
I'll be honest, if I could do some of the things he could do on a
Innit?
skateboard,
He's
I'll be banging on my own chest.
himself, you know. He's like, I want to try this.
I'll be flexing.
I want to talk about mainstream, because going back to your point around laddish culture, if I'm totally honest, as a girl, when the football's on, there's certain roads I'm going to be avoiding, because the pubs and them man there, you want to talk about safety, I don't feel safe. But funny enough, you go into work, you start wearing the same crepe, and all of a sudden, the same man that was trying to give you rah, rah, rah energy is now your best friend in the workplace. And I'm thinking, oh, we actually have got stuff in common. So going to your point about, yes, there are sections where that will be, as with any sport, right? As with any culture, any place, any city, there will be people who will be like that. But then what I'm hearing is, all of this conversation, which I didn't expect for it to come from, is belonging and identity, and how fashion and football bring those two things together. So I guess what I'm asking is, when it becomes mainstream, surely that's a good thing, but I wonder if those who are from the older generations now be seeing the girls wearing the same kicks that from years past they were like, what do you mean? You can't be wearing the same things I was wearing. I just want to get the balance on the convo of what is that like in 2023? And as I'm leaving you to think, because I see your head going, let me go to Sapphire first. Are you in spaces or in places where you're wearing football swag and you're getting looked as if to say, you can't wear that? Like, before, that was designated for us alone.
Yeah, I've had it. So I grew up, I used to play for Leeds United ladies a while back now. I played for West Yorkshire, England colleges, and I had a Leeds United sports jacket that I would wear. And then when I moved to London, I still had it. I don't have it anymore. And yeah, in the tube and stuff, guys would be like, and I'd just be like, yeah, like, I'm comfortable in my ability, so I'm really relaxed about all of that. I've been playing football all my life. I've got loads of football gear. And yeah, I do get blokes sometimes being like, but...
Still, to this day?
Yeah, like, if I've got kit, especially Leeds in London, like, Leeds United, do you know what I mean, in London.
Do you think that it's more so the fact that it's the team that you're wearing in London, or the fact that you're a girl, though? Being
a black girl, and also the club as well. Like, Leeds United is... It's
very local team.
Well, it's got a lot of haters though, innit? Like, everyone hates Leeds, you know what I mean? Like, Chelsea, West Ham, Millwall, like, everyone hates Leeds, innit? So, Leeds has got a lot of haters. I think it was that, and then, yeah, probably my race as well. Like, where I grew up, no black girls played football. Like, I was probably one of, like, two, do you know what I mean? Like, I was the first one, really, from West Yorkshire to go to the top. So, I'm a rarity, but it never put me off. I just always enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
Do you think that if you was to play now, you would have gone further in your career and tried to play football longer?
Yeah. I think what held me back was the lack of parent support. My mother didn't really support the team. My father wasn't really around. Stereotype. I think my family struggled with me playing football. I don't think they really knew what to do with it. And then now that it's mainstream, they're like, oh, all right.
That's the thing about the double-edged sword of mainstream. It becomes popular, so you accept it. But there's a bit of you that's like, why didn't you accept it when I was doing it?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I don't actually have any hatred or any angst about that not being accepted by me. I'm just grateful that I just enjoyed doing it and I continue to do it, and that's what I did. I went to America when I was at uni. Every summer I'd go to America and coach on like soccer camps and like live with different American families and coach on like British soccer camps. I travelled the whole of North America every summer when I was at uni. Again, through the whole camp, the whole British soccer company, there were about three British soccer coaches from all across the UK. I was the only black girl in the whole business, and I just enjoyed it. When I look back now, I'm proud that I did that, but at the time there was no other black women doing this in America. There was no one doing that, like no one did it. But I also think in terms of like being black, being brown, you know, our parents went through so much, and you know, my mother probably had fear. My daughter's there rocking up to Leeds United coaching and all these white people, and I'm just there like, do you know what I mean? She was probably scared and she didn't know what to do with that, and I understand that, and that's just part of it. But there's so many women from loads of ethnic minorities across the UK where their parents are scared and they don't understand it and they don't know what to do. Like, it's a lot of fear and they don't want the child to get treated how they got treated. And
ironically then, you're up north, and you've spoken about how up north that really, really just shaped and moulded fashion for football. Yeah. So do you still believe there's subcultures, or are you still like, nah, that's all dead?
Me personally, in terms of the subcultures that more so like Gary was used to when he was growing up, is not the same as what I'm used to now. Things are consumed so quickly, and to a rate that I actually don't think people appreciate stuff as much anymore, because people like Benny might take weeks or months to perfect a trick, and you see it, wow, that's fire, I might share it to someone else, then you got to do something else again tomorrow, I'm going to unfollow you. And if Gary's not keep on making new designs to post every day, then people aren't as interested. Yeah. Whereas like when I was younger, I can remember I was an Adidas Predator with the pull down tongue. I wanted them for 6 months. I got them, I'm not joking. I put them on and I went to sleep with them on. I was so gassed that I got them, and it came.
Outside shoes in bed.
It came. I'm not joking. It was brand new, and it came with a fold-out thing. It had like Ballack, Lampard, Gerrard. I think even Zidane. It was like one of the last campaigns that he was on, and I can remember I used to look at that and I was like, I have to be on that one day, and I was like so obsessed. Whereas now, it's like my little brothers, they're 9 and 11. They want new pairs of boots. Oh, Neymar, I seen him do this and he scored this guy, I want those and I want this and I want that jersey and I want this and I seen this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like forever changing, and they don't really have a sense of belonging. Yeah. Like at least you could say you felt proud, you like, I represented this team and this team and this team. And like even when I was a bit younger, I played football at like a decent standard. I played for Ealing District and some other teams, and I can remember having the jersey and I was so excited to have it because I seen older kids wearing it when I was like on the bus or whatever, whereas now, things are moving so quickly that it's like you don't even really have time to
appreciate it.
There's an oversaturation of the market.
You see, on that point though, one thing that's been massive though is we've spoken about like football and football kits, right? In recent times, I'm not sure if it was too different before. Everyone would wear like a football kit to stay, but now a football kit is a fashionable item. The way they're being made and designed is for fashion, almost fashion foremost than actual functionality. And because of that, because over the years, you know, fashion has informed what's going on in football. People are going back and be like, you know what, I'm going to get a Feyenoord kit from 1998 because I liked how it looked. You've got corporate offices doing football shirt Fridays. Yeah. So now...
But you know what's funny is what I was saying about subcultures is how you're talking about it there. Yeah. The people that I know that are the biggest football fans probably don't own a jersey.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? This is it. That's like their subcultures, like to be a dresser, go to football, go down the pub, and be like a stand-up gentleman, like he was saying, and be like someone in the local area, rather than be like, I've got this jersey, I've got this, blah, blah, blah. It's like actually being involved in the events that's going on, and to also have a say in like, you know, what the group's doing, where we're gonna go meet up, get on the train all at the same time, all roll together, like actually plan it and organise, rather than be like, I've got a £170 jersey, I'm going to just put it on and go to
Which is a really good point that you make. And just to land us, because we could be going on and on, Gary, I want to land with you. Mainstream. Does football or fashion influence the mainstream? Land us.
Well, I think some of the views have been quite London-centric, which is understandable because that's where you're from and it's where you've grown up. But I think the whole thing of like casual style is much more commonplace outside of London than in London. I think in London it's probably more of a niche look, where I think once you get, particularly where I'm from in the northwest of England, it's how, and I'm speaking about menswear here, it's how most men dress. And it's not just guys of my generation. There's, you know, when I go to watch football, there's loads of young Blackburn fans under the age of 20, under the age of 25, who dress like me and my mates dressed in 1987. And they've got kind of wedge haircuts, Adidas trainers, CP jackets. There's thousands of them out there. It's not like it's kind of some little micro trend. And the thing I love about it is that it's a localised subculture. And I don't like globalisation. I don't like the fact that you go to parties in London and you can go to a party in LA and people in London are dressed in the exact same kind of brands that people at a party in LA are wearing. I like the idea of localised subcultures. I think that's interesting. When I travel, I don't want to go to cities and have an identikit version of the high street in every city that I go to. And so I think where there are localised subcultures, I think that should be kind of celebrated. And I think what's happened recently is that a lot of people in London, they're, like I say, it's become like a trend where people are, you know, they'll go and get a Stone Island jacket or like you said, a replica football shirt, imagining that this is what football fans wear, when actually football casuals don't wear replica shirts.
How do you think that you keep those kind of subcultures alive, though?
If you're going to talk about subculture, you're talking about culture. The word culture, if you break it down, comes from two words: cultivate and nurture. To cultivate and nurture something, you've got to be involved in it, you've got to participate in it. That's where the commonality lies here between what I'm talking about as far as football casuals go and what you're talking about as far as skateboarding goes. It's about participation. You can get people who are going on hype sites, reading about bloatcore or whatever it is and going out and buying a Stone Island jacket and a pair of Adidas trainers because they see it as a trend. But those people will come and go, just in the same way that people are buying into skate brands because they want to look like skateboarders but aren't going to get on a skateboard, see it as a trend. Those people will come and go. But there's a people that are into this stuff, that participate in it week in, week out, day in, day out. And they're the people to be really celebrated. And I think that kind of gets lost a lot of the time nowadays.
Yeah. Do you think that people in the UK right now are getting priced out of those kind of things? Because like even skating, for instance, now it's like skateboards and stuff is a lot more expensive now.
That's the thing. I see someone with a skateboard. I'm like, I know if you skateboard or not. I'm like, I'll look at your shoes. I'm like, have you got the scuffs? Like, can you do flip tricks? I'm like, no. This guy's just holding it. This guy's just the poser. Like,
but he's saying exactly what I'm saying. Where I might see somebody at a football match who's wearing a Stone Island jacket, and I know immediately because of the way they put their clothes together. It's the way they carry themselves. It's the details, and it's kind of like it takes one to know one, and I think you can just spot that. And the samba thing that's going on at the moment, people are talking about it in relation to terrace fashion and football culture, but I think the samba thing has actually been building up for years now. I mean, the whole fixed gear bicycle thing that was going on in like 2006, 2007 in Tokyo and America, that was like the shoe of choice for kids who were into that. And they were streetwear kids. And so the samba, to me, the way the samba's become popular in recent years, it's almost like, it's like an anti-hype shoe. It's a commodity shoe. It's like, I can wear this and go out and do something in it. I'm not into the way that the whole sneaker culture thing has been reduced to the fiscal value of the product. I think there's value in the experiential value of the product. One of the things I love about the range I design, I don't care what people like reseller prices, does not interest me. What interests me is when I go to football on a Saturday afternoon and I see people who've got no idea who I am wearing products that I've designed. That to me is like the ultimate compliment. That's what makes it all worthwhile. That's what it's all about. It's having, this is the pair of trainers that I was wearing the night when I asked my girlfriend out, or this is a jacket I was wearing. Yeah, it's that experiential value, and not just like, hey, I managed to get this and I've flipped it for double the price. I just don't think there's anything interesting in that. That's just consumer culture. That's not real culture. That's not actually going out and being involved in something and having a community and an identity and a sense of belonging and being part of something.
With what you're saying, Gary, I think the reason why I love it is because ultimately, you see what you said about culture there? I think that's the realest thing. We have to celebrate cultures, subcultures, and protect them, because ultimately, popular culture always derives from a separate group that are doing their own thing. People look and go, I want to be that. But the why is always important. Why are people dressed like this? Why are people skateboarding? What are those stories that are being made? That's what needs to be protected, because ultimately, as something gets bigger, those stories tend to get washed away. So for instance, the stuff that you wore when you go into football games, as you're saying now, someone that's wearing them now doesn't even know where that comes from. You see it in music, you see it in fashion, you see it in any work of life, that the core of something kind of gets washed away, and it's how can we make sure that these stories are still told, that they live through the products, that they live through the sport, and that feeling is resonating throughout, and I think that's the key thing.
But do you actually think that that's possible in this day and age where everything's just like...
I think it's totally possible. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
You know, the fans of this brand go out and make their own banners in their team colours. I mean, it blows my mind when people send me a picture and it's like, you know, it's like some guy in Bologna who's gone and kind of made his own banner with. I'm just like, it's just the most incredible thing. You know what I mean?
We always talk about proper Chelsea and stuff like that. There's so many things that because people have built a community and educate others about what it is, that community thread and feeling and fabric still stays true. Like, we all support football teams. People tell you what it means to be a fan of that football club. Things can change 10, 15, 20 years down the line, but people tell you the stories that made it what it was. And it's always about feeling and relating. And it's like, even though like a lot of what we're talking about is products, and as you said, trends come and go, but what is that thing that stays within it that we have to keep promoting to make sure that it's not bastardized and just washes away? Which happens to so many different things.
Which also goes back to the point of belonging. People belong because they identify with the stories and also collect and share the same story as well. We're going to pause there and throw it over to the Q&A session. We've got so many amazing people in the audience. We want to give a massive shout out to the BSTN family for letting us bring our people them in. So we've got a couple of mics that are roving, and I'm sure our special guest will take questions. So if you have got a question, please pop your hand up so we can see, and give your name as well so we can do small shout out for your name. So
my name is Noah. I actually have the luxury of having a family member with a season ticket, but do you feel there's a disconnect from the idea of a casual with the rising prices of football tickets and season tickets, and especially with the Premier League and the demand and everything like that? Do you feel that there's more of a disconnect and there's a disparity due to the cost of tickets and everything like that?
Do you know what's hard? Do you know what's hard with that, yeah? It's a global game, right? Like, I've got relatives that are in Nigeria, and they will probably never be able to come and watch a game or whatnot, but they still feel as Chelsea as I am because they've heard stories or they've kind of learned and everything. And obviously it's a very different experience, but not everyone's going to be able to have that authentic, direct connection to their club. But how can they still feel that feeling? I guess a lot of the time it's through sort of the stories and everything. Sometimes it goes the other way where it's commercialization and it's just product, but then again it loses the essence. So to answer the question, it's a very difficult one because traditionally, your local club, you're going to your local club, and of course the experience is different everywhere. You've got teams, let's say like a Bury, all of the fans are probably most likely going to be in and around it. But I think it's a very hard one to answer because everyone's connection to their football club is different depending on their entry point.
Did you mean football casuals?
Well, yeah, just that the idea of where in like the 80s or whatever, where it was a much more accessible thing to go to either the terraces or something like that, where, I mean, with the kind of cost of tickets and whatever it be, if you are a working class person, it's even more and more difficult to see the game, see your team, stuff like that.
I mean, there are people who've kind of turned their back on sort of top tier football, and you know, I mean, I enjoy watching a championship team. The only thing that kind of spoils a championship for me is teams coming down with parachute payments, you know, because I was saying before this, I really don't care whether we were to get promoted to the Premier League. It'd be nice in one respect. In another respect, do I really want to go watching my team lose week in, week out, unless they get a massive investment and, you know, and having loads of tourists coming down to Ewood Park who just want to see Liverpool and Manchester City playing or whatever. You know, it's kind of... So I think a lot of people have moved away from kind of the top-end football. It has become... But, you know, there's a lot of things about modern football that people can criticise and kind of go, yeah, you know, it's not like it was back in the 80s. There's a lot of things about football in the 80s that were awful. You know, as a football fan going watching football, especially going to away games in the 80s, it's like going behind enemy lines, you know. It was like, you were running the gauntlet going there. But I think what I'm trying to say when I'm talking about participation, I'm talking about community, really. You know, for me, going to football is like the chance at the end of the week where I get to see all my mates together. And I'm a little bit older now, so my mates bring their kids. And we all go to the game together, do you know what I mean? And there's a communal thing about that. There's a connection that we get with that. And it's very difficult to explain. It's like I said earlier, for those who are involved, no explanations necessary. For those who aren't involved, no explanations possible. And that's the way it is. And if you're into it, you're into it. And there'll always be kind of tourists and posers and wannabes and fakes that come into things, but it's kind of that's just the way it is, But I still enjoy going to football. I still enjoy watching Blackburn Rovers. It's great. And yeah, we won the Premier League, so I've kind of been.
In case you didn't know,
just needed to get that in. But I've been at the end of it, of seeing my team be really successful. Winning the league. But I kind of, the most fun I've had in football in recent seasons was when we got relegated to League One. That League One season was great because I realised at the end of that season, it doesn't matter if you beat Fleetwood or if you beat Everton. As long as you win, you go home feeling good. And you and your mates come out there smiling, do you know what I mean? And it's so yeah, that's how it is for me.
I think that it depending on the club as well though, because like City, for instance, now they're winning loads of stuff, but their tickets aren't. I don't think they're as expensive as Chelsea. I know a lot of people that was going. I used to go to Chelsea in 2004 with my dad. He would have a ticket, and I'd just walk in, and it was amazing. You could go have food. He'd probably have a few drinks with his pals. Whereas now, it's like take him to Wolves away. It's still £70 for a ticket with travel and whatever else. For him, he's like, I'm not spending my money on that. Do you find it difficult to stay inspired to keep on making clothes, even though like the demographic or the younger demographic might not really understand the references?
No, I mean, because that's the thing. It's kind of, again, that's kind of a London-centric view of it, because where I go watching football, I see loads of kids wearing Spezial. This is, because I'm of a certain generation, because a lot of the die-hard fans are of that generation, people immediately assume it's only older guys who buy that stuff. But that's not actually the case. And there's because I spend half my time in London, I spend half my time in Lancashire, so I kind of see both sides of it. And when I'm up in Lancashire, there's a lot of younger kids who are just head to toe in black technical sportswear. That's a huge thing, and they're all in the gym. They're all obsessed with the gym, and they're all into kind of hard techno. And then there's the other end of it, which is kind of there's a lot of younger kids who, like I said, dress very much like how me and my friends dressed when we were their age. I remember I saw a film called Quadrophenia, which is about mods, and when I saw Quadrophenia, it blew my mind. I thought it must have been amazing to be a mod in the 60s. And I saw that film in the early 80s. I think that's how it is now for younger kids who are kind of in their early 20s, who are seeing things like The Firm and The Football Factory and those kind of Nick Love films and Away Days, and kind of watching that and going, wow, it must have been amazing to be a casual in the 80s. It's about identity, it's about community, it's about a sense of belonging. And I think, like I say, London is much more global, it's much more cosmopolitan, but for me, I think there's real value in localised subcultures, and I hate the idea of just a globalised, homogenised look that everybody wears and everybody kind of chases their tail in order to get. I'm not really down with that, and I hope that local subcultures continue to thrive.
Yeah.
One more question. Have you got a favourite Adidas shoe?
I get asked that a lot. Probably the Adidas Lacom, which is a shoe that I worked on, which is going to sound extremely kind of egotistical of me to say, but it's probably the most versatile shoe that I've got. If you're asking me what I think the greatest Adidas shoe of all time is, it's between the Gazelle and the Stan Smith, I think. Stan Smith's been royally ripped off by every brand, every fashion designer, but the Gazelle to me is like, it's just a total design classic. Because the thing that's happening with Adidas at the moment, with this classic three-stripe look that's really, really coming through at the moment, that's being driven by customers. That's being driven by the consumer. That's not necessarily been driven by the company. the company are acknowledging it, but it's kind of one of those things it's always going to come around. I've been working with Adidas for 24 years. It's a lifetime. And I've seen it where it kind of goes off the boil and then it kind of reappears. And there's been this sudden resurgence. I mean, my girlfriend's daughter, she's 24, and I've been with my girlfriend 7 years, and she was always wearing
another brand.
My girlfriend's daughter was always wearing a certain other brand, and she texted me the other week and said, I want to speak to you about some Adidas trainers. And I texted back and said, Samba, ? She went, how did you know? And I was like, but it's kind of, but the thing about Samba is it's kind of like I say, it's a commodity shoe, but hopefully it's an entry point for people to realise that Adidas's back catalogue and archive of these shoes is pretty vast, and there's a lot of kind of subtle differences between, people go, oh, it's just a kind of a T-toe shoe with 3 stripes on it and gum sole. But actually, when you dig a bit deeper and you know the differences between what's what in these shoes, it's, it's interesting. I think it's really opened up recently for Adidas, and I think, long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bring back some more classic football boots.
No, come on now, let's go. Thank you guys so much. I'm sorry to cut it there. Ladies and gents, this conversation has been amazing. Thank you so much for locking in. And thank you to our very, very special guests. Can you make some noise for our incredible guests? You got Maya on the way, you got Sapphire, you got Ellis, you got Gary, and you've also got Benny as well. Ladies and gents, give it up for my special guests. This has been pretty amazing. I think the question that I want to leave you with is, does football or fashion make you feel more where you belong? Let us know in the comments. We cannot wait to be back with another episode. We have been BSTN London. Shouts goes out to Adidas from the south, from the heart. Ladies and gents, we'll see you very soon. Take care. Peace. Woo!